So I've always been a skeptic. I still am to this day. But this is one of those experiences that just stick. In October of last year, I visited Prague through my college. It was a great experience overall, with professional tour guides, walk through the city and such. First day we went to Prague Astronomical Clock, which is in the old town hall in the oldest parts of Prague. We got the internal tour, including the underground corridors, halls, and homes under the town hall. Beneath the old town hall lies a complex network of underground chambers and corridors. These underground spaces were created due to the natural sinking of the ground and the need for additional storage areas. Initially, the underground served as storage cellars for goods and supplies. While I was there, I initially didn't feel much of anything. I was slightly uncomfortable by the idea of basements or anything underground, as I always have been since I was a child. But as we ventured further into the corridors, we were told more information. I started to feel uneasy, more than usual. It felt like I was being watched intently and closely. That feeling you get when your boss is watching over you. That sense of anxiety of it all. That combined with a sudden taste of metal in my mouth freaked me out. And as I nudged one of my professors to see if I was alone in this experience, he simply said that he felt nothing and told me not to make a fuss over it. So I didn't. I kept quiet and ignored it. This was until we made it to the dungeon part of the tour. In the 17th century, during the reign of the Habsburgs, the underground chambers were used as prison cells. Political prisoners and criminals were incarcerated there, enduring harsh conditions. The most infamous section of the underground is known as the dungeon, where prisoners were held in cramped and dark cells. And when I tell you the instant sense of dread that fell over me before the tour guide had even told me what the room was, the air felt heavier than normal. I started to shiver, and my Apple Watch was telling me that my pulse was getting too high and that I should sit down. And although it might be a mixture of my prior nervousness, I kept seeing something out of the corner of my eye. Not in the, there's a person over there, but in the, there's something over there. Suddenly, the feeling of uneasiness became a fully fledged panic attack, and I had to leave the tour prematurely. I don't know if this was just me feeling uneasy or if there was something more to it. If anyone can tell me, please do. Okay, so this is my first time riding here. Since I'm a kid, I've been experiencing some paranormal things. The one thing that I want to tell you is one of my first real unexplained experience. It started when I was around 13 years old. Came back from school and I was living in an apartment at the second floor. Every day I used to take the elevator, walking with heavy backpack plus long day at school. But this day, even though I grabbed the elevator handle, I let it go. I never been able to tell why, but something deep inside me told me not to take the elevator that day. Nothing happened with it, so I just took the stairs. But when I arrived to the floor, in the door to the corridor, there was a small little, window, so you could see the stairs through it. It was kinda tall, so kids couldn't look through it. Don't know if that is clear. And I froze for a second, because I saw an old creepy man standing in the doorway looking at me. And then immediately thought it was someone visiting one of my neighbors. There were 4 other apartments on that floor. I'd never seen this man before, so I knew it was not one of my neighbors. I grabbed the handle and was about to say hi, but as soon as I grabbed it, the face completely vanished. For a long time, I thought it was hallucinations. But after that, I didn't tell anyone for years. Some weird stuff started to happen. Things even in the apartment. You can't debunk it. But I kind of tried to forget about it. forget his face looking gray and empty for 6 years later. Then my adorable nephew at age 1.5. When this happened, I was generally running in my house while we were in the pool. I hear my mom was checking on him. Then suddenly he walked backwards, pointing to the sofa, and started to cry. We immediately asked what's going on, and he asked who was the man under the sofa. Literally have goosebumps writing this. At first we thought he started to cry, but he said word for word, "But mommy, there is an old man laying under the sofa." He's very advanced for his age, so he already started talking very well. 3 years later, the way he described him immediately reminded me that it looked like the man that I saw. Today, I'm pretty sure that's the same person we both saw, but we don't know who it is. I'll be honest, my whole life I've been fascinated with the idea of ghosts, but I've never been able to convince myself that they're real until one day when I was 18. Me and my best friend from college went to stay at her dad's house for a couple days. He lived in the countryside outside of the city in a cottage. It was a really small town. They didn't even have shops. We'd been there for a few nights and everything was fine until the last night. We were both sharing a bed in the spare room. It was late, but we were chatting and we both heard the loudest crash. It sounded like all the dishes in the kitchen had fallen out of the cupboards. We both heard it, looked at each other completely frozen. We tried to convince ourselves it was something like the dishwasher, but we just couldn't relax, so we went to wake her dad up. To be honest, we were amazed nobody else had heard it. She had a younger sister, about 8 years old. He got up and we all went downstairs. Absolutely nothing. The kitchen was fine. The dishes were fine. Not a thing wrong in the house, but it didn't make sense because it was such a loud crash. We go back to bed, convinced ourselves we made it up. We must be exaggerating. About 15 minutes later, when her dad had fallen back asleep, we were both laying in bed, wide awake, but trying to sleep when we heard noises in the hallway. It sounded like somebody was just walking around, but we couldn't see under the door, no lights were on, and we would hear her dad snoring. Our room was next to the bathroom too, and we could hear that somebody hadn't just got up to go use the toilet. We're both absolutely petrified and convinced each other we need to open the door and see. We both grabbed weapons. I think I had a can of hairspray and she had a lamp. As we both go to open the door, we heard somebody whisper, "Stop." I swear to God, I nearly passed out. We both heard it at the exact same time because we both looked at each other in shock. We both hid under the blankets all night until it got light out and just slept on the drive home. I'm 26 now. I still think about it. I've never had an experience like that since, and I still don't know what to make of it. This happened 15 years ago. I was a college student, lived with my now wife and our dog in a one room together, with other students in another rooms. My girlfriend had to work one evening and she was to come back around midnight. I've had school the next day, so I went to sleep a bit earlier and I was in our room together with our dog. We slept. I was laying on the bed next to the wall, and on my right side was an empty bed placed for my girlfriend. Suddenly I woke up. I didn't sleep anymore. I felt the presence of something else in the room. I felt something very dark. I was laying on my back, then opened my eyes, and something threw me from my bed on the floor. I did a 180 an 80-grade flip and was on all fours on the ground. Then I saw in front of me, on the floor, a huge dark circle, and that something wanted me to fall inside of that dark circle. I didn't see that person. I only saw the dark circle and felt the power of something very strong that pulled me from my bed. I thought this has to be a demon that wanted me to fall into hell. I started to scream and cry very loud, and in that moment came my girlfriend inside the room, and then everything was gone. But our dog started to bark exactly on the spot where the dark circle was. He barked about half an hour and was very excited. This is absolutely 100% true. That was no dream, as I can remember everything and I was 100% awake at the time. I didn't do any drugs or alcohol. I've had bruises and scratches on my body. There is no way that I could alone jump from my bed, placed laying on my back, over one empty bed placed, and end on all fours without help. This scared me to death. Maybe something wanted me to do sins in my life and fall into that hole, which meant hell for me. That was the scariest thing that ever happened to me. I actually became a very religious person after this. So one night I was rudely awoken around 3 a.m. by the sounds of someone crying. That night, I fell asleep on the main floor living room couch. I thought it was one of my kids. I have 3 children sleeping on the main floor, so I lifted my head and listened for a few seconds. Sure enough, it sounded like someone crying very softly. As soon as I stood up, it stopped. I went walking towards the bedrooms to check on my kids, and everyone was definitely sleeping. I went to the bathroom after checking out everything, finished my business, and I started walking towards the door. Sure enough, the door slowly swung, fully opened. I froze, and I was kind of freaking out to myself, but there was no one around. I walked out and looked around, seeing nothing out of place. Went back to the couch and was thinking about what happened. Then I remembered 2 years ago, I was taking care of my sick mom full time before she passed in October 2021. The crying sounded like how my mom used to wake up and cry in the middle of the night. So I ended up more sad than scared and just went back to sleep. Hi all, I just want to preface with this. I swear to you that everything I'm about to tell you is real, at least to how I perceived it. But I'm a pragmatic person and generally want to debunk this. I'm asking for anyone's help who is a show or movie buff to please suggest if there's a show movie that exists similar to what I'm explaining, so I know what I experienced wasn't supernatural. I consider posting this in a "What's That Movie" thread, but I'm hesitant thinking that it would get taken down. This occurred around 2008. My brothers and I were watching Scary Movie 4 up until late hours of the night on Comedy Central, until I eventually fell asleep. I woke up to a show where a man was sprinting through what appeared to be some sort of concrete shelter. I couldn't see most of his surroundings because it was pitch black. All I could see was where his flashlight was shining. I remember the man screaming, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my effing God." He eventually found himself in a 4-way junction, or maybe a larger room. It's hard to remember. I do remember shadows swiftly moving around the guy, it eventually surrounding him. Then I heard something I'll never forget, a loud, high-pitched crackle. It felt like my TV went from a normal volume to its maximum volume immediately. In my bed, I tried to move or leave the room, but I was completely paralyzed. I looked around and saw shadows darting across the lower half of the walls by the TV in the corner of the room. Fortunately, I was able to pull the sheets over my head as the crackling continued. After what felt like eternity, I gained the courage to crawl out of the corner of my bed, hitting the ground. I then crawled to the door, where I saw my dad with a Bible in his hand. I immediately regained my strength and was able to finally sprint out of the room into our kitchen. Crying, I told him that I thought my older brother was pranking me, which made my dad very angry. However, he went into the room to turn the light on. I saw him pause. In my life, even now 10 years later, I'd never seen my dad frightened except for this moment. He just stopped. Out of curiosity, I peeked from behind my dad and saw that the TV had the show Family Matters on, with a family hugging each other. It wasn't until years later that my dad told me his side of the story. He was reading the Bible in the middle of the night since he couldn't sleep. He heard a TV getting very loud, so he decided to come turn it off. When he entered the room, he actually saw 2 cops in a cop car. One of the cops had no skin, just raw muscle. That cop had a giant grin on his face, turning over to smile at my dad until he saw the Bible in his hand. The cop seemed to immediately become terrified, and then the channel changed. This is all I can remember from that moment. It really bothers me that I cannot find the show or prove that this wasn't some weird supernatural event. Thanks for reading, and please comment if you have similar stories, or if you know what the show is called. Last night I couldn't sleep at all, which is fairly normal since I woke up. I work graveyard shifts, and it's pretty much turned me into a night owl. So even on my days off, I'm usually up all night long. So I'm up in bed watching a rom-com, laughing and in a great mood, and decided that I deserve to treat myself to the occasional drink. My bar is in my basement, which is fully finished and furnished. It's pretty much a man cave. I spent entire nights down there by myself, or with the gang, and nothing strange has ever happened. Anything creepy or weird down there was absolutely the furthest thing from my mind. I finish laughing my butt off and head down there. I go behind the bar, pour myself a drink, and head upstairs. But as I'm on the second to last step to the first floor, from behind me I hear, "Hey," coming from downstairs in the middle of the basement. It was an older man's voice in their 50s, I think. I know the house is empty except for me, and it scared the absolutely shit out of me. I looked down there, and nothing moved. No one spoke or came forward, and I freaked the fuck out. I jutted up the last 2 steps and slammed the basement door closed. I'm wondering, did I imagine that? Is there someone in my house? And as I stand there panicking, I hear the same man's voice coming from down in the basement, but muffled by the door. By the intonation, he asked a question, then continued to talk right after. He was talking to me. The question sounded something like, "Where are you going?" I couldn't make much out of it, especially what he said after that, but I was panicked, adrenaline pumping, and I said, "Fuck this shit." Someone broke into my house. I ran into the next room, grabbed my flashlight, my handyman baseball bat, and headed the hell back down there. Silence. Just silence. Slowly I turned on every light in every room down there, ready to bash some homeless man's head in. I'm sorry to all the homeless people, but nothing. Every nook and every corner checked in the basement is completely empty, except for me, except for my panicking and heavily breathing ass. I noped the fuck out of there, locked myself in my bedroom, and spent the next hour in crisis mode checking my basement cameras, which showed nothing and no one except for me pouring myself a drink and then coming back down there and running around like a madman with a bat a minute later. I went down to the basement this afternoon after I woke up with my trusty bat in hand and rechecked the whole place. Still, I found nothing. No one, just me questioning both my sanity and my reality. I know what I heard. The guy was pretty loud, and he was talking in my directions and at me. Even through the door, I heard him talking down there at me up the stairs. It seemed like he was trying to have a conversation with me. I've never had any kind of break-in. This is a very safe neighborhood, or any kind of remotely strange experience down there in 15 years here. Does stuff like this happen to people out of the blue? Or am I finally losing my ever-loving mind? I don't know what to do. Update. It happened at 1:50 a.m. At this point, I believe it is most likely paranormal. I think I'm going down there tonight to repeat the same exact process at the same time, see what happens. My curiosity's gotten the better of me, and I want to know what it has to say. If it's actually an intruder, I'm coming prepared this time, but it should still be very interesting. Update number 2. I've been down here from 1:45 a.m. until 3 a.m., walking around, asking and looking and nothing. Part of me feels like it needs the darkness, or even just the element of unpredictability in order to manifest. Maybe it needs a buildup of energy, which is discharged last night. So it's tapped out right now. No idea. I have nothing to show for it tonight, but don't say that I didn't try. Feel free to ask any further questions. I'll keep a keen eye on the basement. If anything happens now, you'll all absolutely hear from me.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross